My name is Alyssa Carter. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the reliable one. The daughter who showed up, paid the bills, cleaned up the emotional messes, and pretended not to notice when no one else did the same for me. I used to think that's what love meant, doing more, giving more, forgiving more. Until that day, when my mother looked me in the eye and said those words like she'd been waiting her whole life to say them. It started on an ordinary Saturday. The sky was gray, the kind of muted color that matched the quiet disappointment I'd been carrying for months. I'd stopped by my parents' house with groceries, fresh produce, some medication for Dad's blood pressure, and the bakery rolls Mom loved. They hadn't asked, but I knew the money was tight since Dad's early retirement. It wasn't a big deal. I'd been helping them for years. Mom was in the kitchen, rearranging cabinets, like she always did when she wanted to look busy. "You didn't need to get all this," she said, not looking up. "I know," I said softly. "But I wanted to." She huffed. "You always want to. You think everything can be fixed by throwing money around." The sting hit immediately. I laughed awkwardly, setting the bag down. "Mom, what? I'm just trying to help." She turned, hands on her hips. "You think we don't notice? The way you act like you're above everyone because you have a job that pays well." My throat tightened. "I don't act like that. Please," she scoffed. "You've been different since you moved out. Like you're too good for this house. For us." Before I could answer, Dad shuffled in from the living room, rubbing his temples. "What's going on now?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "I just brought some things." Mom crossed her arms, lips curling. She's showing off again. Always has to remind us who makes the big bucks. That's when she said it. "We're not your bank anymore." The room fell silent. I froze, stunned, the words echoing inside my chest.
"What?"
"You heard me," she said with a bitter smile. "You used to take from us. Now you think you can buy our love with your money. But we're done being your emotional ATM." I wanted to argue, to scream, to ask what the hell she was talking about, but my mouth went dry. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. The truth was, I hadn't asked them for a dime since I was 21. I'd paid for my own college through scholarships and part-time work. I even helped them with their mortgage when Dad's hours got cut. But trying to reason with my mother never worked. Logic didn't stand a chance against whatever narrative she decided was true that day. Minutes later, I was standing in the driveway, holding my keys, realizing that the woman who raised me didn't see me as a daughter anymore. She saw me as a walking reminder of everything she resented. On the drive home, tears blurred my vision. The world outside the windshield was a smear of gray and rain. My heart felt like it had been hollowed out and filled with cold air. I wasn't angry yet, just deeply, bone-tiredly sad. Growing up, Mom had always been unpredictable. Warm one moment, icy the next. She'd bake cookies for my friends and then later whisper that I embarrassed her in front of them. Dad wasn't cruel, just quiet. A man who avoided conflict like it was contagious. When she yelled, he'd retreat behind his newspaper or step outside to check the garden, even in the dead of winter. When I turned 18, I thought leaving home would fix everything. I got a scholarship to college 2 states away and told myself I was finally free. But the guilt followed me. Every phone call started the same way, Mom's sigh, the subtle comments about how lonely they were, how much they struggled, how I'd changed. And so, I helped. I sent money. I drove down on weekends. I said yes to every request because saying no made me feel like a terrible daughter. Until now. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, rereading a text from Mom that popped up an hour after I left. "Don't come next week. We don't need charity." I didn't respond. For once, I didn't have the energy to explain myself. The following days passed in a strange fog. I went to work, smiled when I needed to, but inside, I felt disconnected from everything. My best friend, Jenna, noticed immediately. "You've been weird lately," she said over lunch. "What's going on?" I hesitated, then told her everything. She listened quietly, her expression a mix of disbelief and sympathy. "Wait, your mom said that to you?" After everything you've done for them?
Yeah.
I laughed softly, but it came out bitter. Guess I've been demoted. Jenna leaned forward. Alyssa, you know this isn't about money, right? She's jealous. You got out. You built something without them. I shrugged. Maybe, but it still hurts. Of course it hurts, she said gently. You're still trying to earn love from people who only know how to use guilt. Her words hit harder than I expected. That night, I went home and sat on my couch, thinking about every sacrifice I'd made. Every weekend I'd canceled plans to help them. Every time I sent money instead of buying something for myself. I thought about how, no matter what I did, it was never enough. And that's when the shift began. Not anger, not yet, but clarity. I started to see patterns. The way Mom always turned moments of kindness into accusations. How Dad stayed silent when I needed him most. How their love felt conditional, like a subscription I had to keep renewing. 2 weeks later, my phone rang again. It was Dad. Hey, kiddo, he said awkwardly. Your mom, she's still upset, but maybe you could come by? Just to smooth things over. I stared at the wall. Dad, I didn't do anything wrong. I know, he murmured quickly. But you know how she gets. She just needs time. She's had 30 years, I said quietly. Maybe it's time I need some, too. He sighed, and I could hear the weight in his voice. You've always been the peacemaker, Alyssa. Not anymore, I said, and ended the call. That night, I realized something that terrified me. If I stopped trying, if I truly stepped away, I'd have no family left. But maybe, just maybe, I'd finally have peace. Still, letting go wasn't as simple as deciding it. The guilt came in waves. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. replaying every argument, every word Mom had thrown at me. What if she was right? What if I had changed? What if I'd become cold? Then I'd remember the sound of her voice, sharp, smug, certain, and how little she cared that her words shattered me. By the end of that month, I stopped calling. I didn't visit. For the first time in my life, I chose silence. And silence, I learned, is a powerful thing. It doesn't just create distance. It forces truth to surface. About 3 weeks later, a message appeared from my brother, Ethan. We weren't close, mostly because Mom always made sure of it. She thrived on comparison, pitting us against each other like a sport.
Hey, Alyssa.
Mom says you're cutting them off. What's going on? I stared at the text. Cutting them off. I hadn't asked for anything. I hadn't demanded. I'd simply stopped showing up. I typed slowly. I'm just taking space. It's not about money. He replied instantly. She said you're punishing them. That you told her she's a bad mother. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. That's when something inside me began to harden. Not cruelty, but resolve. I realized that if I didn't define my story, she would. And in her version, I'd always be the villain. That night, I sat down and wrote everything. Every manipulation, every guilt trip, every cruel comment. I didn't know why at first. Maybe to remind myself it really happened. Maybe to see it all in one place. But as I wrote, something shifted. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was recognition. My mother wasn't the villain in some grand tragedy. She was just a small, bitter woman who feared losing control. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. When I finally closed my journal, I whispered into the quiet room, "You're not my bank anymore either." Because love, real love, doesn't keep a balance sheet. And that realization, I think, was the first real step toward freedom. The silence stretched into weeks, then months. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet absence that grew heavier each day. No calls, no texts, no guilt-laden reminders from Mom about family dinners or how good daughters behave. I thought cutting contact would bring me peace, but at first, it only brought confusion. I didn't know who I was without the constant pull of obligation. Every morning, I'd wake up expecting a text or some new crisis to fix, and when it didn't come, I felt unanchored, like I was floating in open water without a map. But something strange began to happen after the first few weeks. I started to breathe. The tension I used to carry in my shoulders eased a little. I had time to walk in the park after work, to read without interruption, to cook dinner for myself without rushing to drop food at their doorstep. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was quiet. And quiet, I realized, could be a kind of healing. Until one Friday evening in early March. I was at home watching rain streak down my window when my phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made my stomach twist. Ethan. I hesitated before answering. Hey. His tone was curt. So, you're really doing this? Doing what? Pretending we don't exist. Ignoring mom and dad like you're some martyr. I sighed. Ethan, that's not what this is. Then what is it? Because she's been crying for weeks. Dad's worried sick. You just vanished. I didn't vanish, I said quietly. I just needed boundaries. He scoffed. Boundaries? That's your excuse? You think you're better than everyone now. The words stung, not because they were new, but because they were familiar. Mom's favorite refrain. Ethan, I said carefully, has she told you what happened? She said you stormed out after she tried to talk to you. That you've been holding things over her head for years. Money, success, whatever. I almost laughed. That's not what happened. Then tell me your version. I hesitated because it hit me then. No version of the story would matter to him. He'd already chosen which side to believe. I don't want to fight, I said finally. I just need space. You always need something, he muttered. Mom's right. You only care when it's convenient. That sentence landed like a punch. I sat frozen for a moment after the call ended, the silence in my apartment suddenly deafening. I didn't cry. Not that night. I just sat there and stared at the dark window until my reflection blurred. I had always tried to protect Ethan from Mom's manipulation. I thought maybe he'd see through it one day. But he was still caught in her orbit, the way I once was. That weekend, I went to the farmer's market, something small, something ordinary. I walked slowly between the stalls, breathing in the scent of coffee and rain-damp herbs. It felt good to be surrounded by people who didn't expect anything from me. An older woman at a honey stand smiled and offered me a sample. You have kind eyes, she said as I tasted it. I laughed softly. Thanks. I don't hear that often. She shrugged. You must have carried a lot of worry. It leaves a shadow behind the eyes. Her words hit deeper than I wanted to admit. I bought a small jar and walked away feeling strangely seen. When I got home, I opened my journal again, the one where I'd written everything down that night after Mom's outburst. But this time, I didn't write about her. I wrote about me. I wrote that I wanted to travel somewhere new this year. I wrote that I wanted to feel love that didn't make me question my worth. I wrote that maybe healing wasn't about forgetting, but about finally being honest, even when the truth hurt. And then, life began to quietly shift. My boss, Mark, offered me a lead role on a new project at work, something that required confidence, delegation, and late nights. A year ago, I would have declined, terrified of disappointing my parents or being too busy to help them. But this time I said yes. The first week was brutal, long hours, constant meetings, but it felt good. Like I was rebuilding myself, piece by piece. Then one morning, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. Mom's in the hospital. Thought you should know. My chest tightened. What happened? Stress and high blood pressure. She's fine. But she keeps asking for you. I stared at the text for a long time. I wanted to rush there, the way I always did, but something inside me hesitated. I called the hospital instead. A nurse confirmed she was stable, resting. That should have been enough comfort, but guilt began clawing its way up my throat. That night, I sat awake, torn between compassion and exhaustion. The part of me that still longed for approval whispered, "Go. Be the good daughter again." But another voice, the quieter, stronger one, said, "You've done enough bleeding for people who never stop the cut." Still, by morning, I found myself driving toward the hospital anyway. When I walked into her room, she looked smaller somehow, the sharp edges of her face softened by fatigue. For a fleeting second, I almost forgot everything. "Hi, Mom." Her eyes flicked open.
Oh.
You decided to come. The tone. That old tone. Even here, even now. I forced a breath. Ethan said you weren't feeling well. She sniffed. Stress. You wouldn't know about that. Living your fancy life. I blinked slowly. I actually would. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two women bound by blood and disappointment. Then she said, I guess guilt finally brought you back. I wanted to scream. To tell her it wasn't guilt, it was concern. But arguing with her felt like shouting into a storm. The sound disappears. The effort drowns. So instead, I said quietly, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. She turned away. We're fine. Always have been. A nurse walked in, breaking the tension, and I took that as my cue to leave. As I reached the doorway, Mom's voice stopped me. You can't keep punishing your family forever, Alyssa. I turned back slowly. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself. She smirked weakly. That's what selfish people always say. And just like that, the small flicker of compassion inside me went out. I left the hospital without another word. In the parking lot, the cold air hit my face, and I finally let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was disbelief. How could someone be so determined to twist love into a weapon? That night, I called Jenna. She's never going to change, I said. No, Jenna agreed. But you can. I sank onto my couch. How do I stop letting it control me? By realizing you already did, she said softly. You didn't go there for her approval. You went because you chose to. That's power, Alyssa. I didn't answer right away, but I felt something inside me settle like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. In the days that followed, I began setting firmer boundaries in other areas too. Saying no at work when I was overloaded. Turning down social events I didn't want. It was strange how one act of defiance, refusing to be guilt-tripped by my own mother, could start reshaping everything. Then one evening my phone lit up again. But this time it wasn't from Ethan or Mom. It was from an unknown number. Hi, Alyssa. This is Karen, your parents' neighbor. I thought you should know there's been some drama here lately. They told people you've been sending them money again. Something about paying their bills. I frowned. What? I replied. That's not true. I haven't sent them anything in months. She texted back. Yeah, that's what I thought. They've been telling everyone you're helping out because they forgave you. It's been a whole story around here. My stomach dropped. Even from a distance, they were rewriting the narrative, turning me into the repentant daughter who came crawling back, desperate for forgiveness. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the message, my heart pounding. Then a calm, cold realization washed over me. Maybe this wasn't just about emotional manipulation anymore. Maybe it was about reputation, control, and the lies they told to keep their image spotless. Something inside me hardened again, but this time, it wasn't pain. It was resolve. If they wanted to spin stories about me, fine. But I wasn't going to let their lies define me anymore. That was the night I decided I wouldn't just disappear quietly. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, whether it would be confrontation, truth, or something sharper. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the fallout. Because the truth had always been my prison. Now it might just become my weapon. The truth has a strange way of unraveling. Quietly at first, then all at once, like a thread tugged loose that won't stop. After Karen's message that night, I sat staring at my phone, replaying every word in my head. They told people I was sending them money again. That wasn't just a lie. It was deliberate reputation damage. It painted them as victims and me as the daughter who had made amends. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I woke with that familiar tension in my chest, the kind that used to make me drive to their house with groceries or pay their overdue utilities just to stop the guilt from festering. But this time, I didn't do any of that. Instead, I opened my laptop. If they wanted to play games with stories, I needed facts. I started small, looking through my old bank transfers, messages, and emails. There were years' worth of transactions labeled Mom, groceries, Dad, meds, mortgage help. It made me sick to see how much I'd given, quietly, without ever asking for repayment or gratitude. But then I saw something else, a pattern. The amounts they claimed to need for emergencies always coincided with big purchases. My brother's new car? The same week Dad told me his medical bill was due. Mom's sudden kitchen remodel? 2 days after she cried about late payments. For years, they'd been guilt-tripping me into funding their comfort, not survival. I pushed back from the desk and stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. All those times they said they were struggling, that I was their only hope, it had never been about need. It had been about control. The betrayal burned deeper than any insult ever could. I called Jenna that night. "They've been lying for years," I said, pacing the apartment. "All those times they made me feel guilty. It was never about helping. They were using me." Jenna's voice was calm but firm. "You already knew, Alyssa. You just didn't want to believe it." "Maybe," I said, exhaling shakily. "But this feels deliberate. They're telling people I'm supporting them again. Like I came crawling back. Why would they do that?" "Because the truth doesn't serve them," she said. "If you walked away, they lose power. But if they tell everyone you came back, they get to keep being the good parents, and you're the repentant daughter. It's all about appearances." Her words settled over me like fog. For a long time, my family's reputation had been sacred. We were the nice Carters. My mom volunteered at the local church. My dad helped neighbors with small repairs. To everyone else, they were kind, giving, picture-perfect. And me? I was the daughter who made them proud, the one who went far. The irony was, I hadn't gone anywhere at all. I'd just been orbiting them like a satellite, tethered by guilt. Now that I'd broken free, they couldn't stand it. So they built a new story, one where I never left. I spent the next few days oscillating between anger and disbelief. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected another twist, another guilt trip. But what came next wasn't a message. It was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Ethan stood there, his hands shoved in his jacket pockets, looking tense. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, but stepped aside.
Sure.
He walked in like he owned the space, scanning the apartment, the framed photos, the plants by the window. "Nice place," he said flatly. "Thanks," I replied. We stood there in awkward silence before he said, "You know, Mom and Dad said you were doing better, that you'd patch things up." I stared at him. "You really believe that?" He shrugged. "I don't know what to believe anymore. All I know is, Mom's been saying you sent them money again. That you're sorry for how you acted." I almost laughed. Of course she did. She can't admit I stopped playing her game. He frowned. "Game? Alyssa, they're our parents." "Exactly," I snapped. "And parents don't manipulate their kids like this. They don't lie to neighbors about imaginary apologies just to look good." He rubbed his forehead. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" I said, voice rising. "Do you know how much money I sent them over the years? How many times I bailed them out while they complained behind my back that I was too proud? Do you even care?" He looked uncomfortable. "They told me you wanted to help." "Yeah," I said bitterly. "Because every time I didn't, they'd make me feel like a monster." Ethan shifted his weight. "You don't get it. Mom's been through a lot." I stared at him in disbelief. "And I haven't?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "She's still your mother." I nodded slowly. "You're right."
She is.
"But being a mother doesn't mean she gets to keep breaking me." He looked away, jaw tight. "You've changed, Alyssa." "I hope so," I said quietly. When he left, I felt both shaken and strangely liberated. For the first time, I hadn't backed down. I hadn't apologized. I'd said the truth, out loud, to someone who didn't want to hear it. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about something my therapist once told me. When you stop feeding the pattern fights back. And fight back, it did. Over the next week, I started hearing from old family friends, polite, awkward messages that all started the same way. "Hey, I heard things are better now with your mom," or "Glad you and your parents worked things out." Each one was a little stab of disbelief. They were rewriting my life in real time, and everyone believed them. I tried ignoring it, but the lies spread faster than I expected. Even people at work, Mutual acquaintances through church or town events started mentioning how nice it was that my family made peace. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. But mostly, I wanted the truth to mean something again. That's when the idea started forming. At first, it was just a spark, a thought that made me nervous. But the more I replayed their lies, the more I realized silence was protecting them, not me. If they could rewrite the story publicly, why couldn't I tell the real one? I didn't want revenge, not the cruel kind. I didn't want to humiliate them. But I wanted to stop pretending. I wanted to reclaim my narrative. So I started small. I wrote an open letter, not for the internet, not for neighbors, just for myself. I wrote, "My name is Alyssa Carter. For years, I believed love meant sacrifice. I gave everything to people who only loved me when I served their needs. When I stopped giving, they called it betrayal. But I'm done apologizing for healing." I read it out loud when I finished, my hands shaking. It felt like confession and closure all at once.
Jenna read it the next day.
"You should publish this," she said. "What, like online?" "Why not? You're not naming them. You're just telling your story. People need to hear it." I hesitated. "They'll know it's about them." She smiled sadly. "Maybe that's the point." I thought about it for days. I imagined the fallout, mom calling, yelling, playing the victim again. But I also imagined the quiet freedom of truth being out there, where no one could twist it. A week later, I did it. I posted it anonymously on a storytelling platform. Within hours, it began to spread. Thousands of views. Hundreds of comments from strangers saying things like, "This is my life too," or "Thank you for writing what I couldn't say." It was overwhelming and strangely healing. Then 3 days later, the inevitable happened. My phone rang. Mom's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer, but she called again.
And again.
Until finally I picked up. Her voice was shaking, not with sadness, but fury. "How could you do this to us?" I swallowed hard. "Do what? You think I don't know that story was about me? Everyone's been calling. You embarrassed this family." I stayed calm. "I didn't mention your name." "Oh, don't play dumb. Everyone knows." I took a deep breath. Then maybe everyone finally knows the truth. For a moment, silence crackled through the line. Then she hissed, "You ungrateful little..."
Click.
I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From the sudden, electric realization that she couldn't control me anymore. That night, I sat by the window, staring at the city lights. I knew this wasn't over, that she'd double down, twist the story again, maybe even retaliate. But I didn't care, because for once, the truth wasn't buried under guilt. It was standing in the light, fragile, messy, and mine. And something told me that this was just the beginning. For weeks after that confrontation, my parents didn't call. Not once. The silence, in a strange way, was both painful and peaceful. Painful because I'd never gone this long without hearing from Mom. She used to call almost every day just to gossip, complain, or guilt-trip me. Peaceful because for the first time, I could breathe without feeling the weight of someone's disapproval hanging over my life. Then, one Sunday morning, I received a text from my younger brother, Ethan.
"Hey.
Mom's in the hospital. She said not to tell you, but I think you should know." I sat on my couch, phone trembling in my hands. My mind flashed back to her sharp tone that day. "We're not your bank anymore." It stung even now. But despite everything, she was still my mother. My heart twisted. I drove straight to the hospital. The smell of antiseptic hit me the moment I walked through the automatic doors. My chest tightened as I reached the room number Ethan had sent. Mom was sitting upright in the hospital bed, a white band around her wrist, reading a magazine as if she were just lounging at home. When she looked up and saw me, her expression didn't soften. No surprise. No relief. Just a faint smirk. "Well," she said. "Look who decided to show up." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Ethan said you were sick." "Oh, please," she scoffed, tossing the magazine onto her lap. "It's just a mild episode. Stress, probably. Not that you'd understand stress." "Stress?" I asked, confused. Your father's been out of work again, she said casually, as though discussing the weather. We've been carrying all the weight, Olivia. Everything. The bills, the mortgage, your brother's tuition. My pulse quickened. Mom, you chose to pay for those things. I didn't ask for any of it. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. You never have to ask, do you? You just live your life, and somehow everyone around you ends up cleaning up your messes. My jaw clenched. What messes, Mom? I pay my own rent, my own bills. I don't borrow a dime from anyone. Maybe not money, she snapped, but you've been living off our sacrifices your whole life. We gave you everything, and now you can't even help when we're drowning. I took a slow, steady breath. I offered to help, remember? You said, we're not your bank anymore. Her face flushed red, her voice rising. Don't twist my words, Olivia. Ethan stepped between us. Mom, stop, he muttered, clearly uncomfortable. But she wasn't done. She leaned back against the pillow, her tone dripping with venom. You think you're better than us now because you can afford your little apartment and your car? Don't forget who raised you, who made sure you even had a chance. That did it. The guilt, the manipulation, the emotional blackmail, all of it snapped something inside me. I'm not here to argue, I said quietly. I came because I care. But if this is just another way to make me feel small, I'm leaving. Her eyes widened, surprised by my calm. You wouldn't dare. I already have. And I walked out. Outside, the sunlight felt harsh, almost mocking. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring blankly at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness anymore. From clarity. I realized something in that moment. My family didn't want love. They wanted control. And I was done giving them the power to take mine. Still, that decision didn't come without consequences. A week later, Ethan called me again. Mom's furious. She says you embarrassed her at the hospital. Dad's siding with her. They said they're cutting you out of everything, family gatherings, inheritance, all of it. I laughed bitterly. I didn't even know there was anything to cut me out from. But deep down, the words hurt. Not because I wanted money, but because it was so easy for them to erase me, as if I'd been nothing but an inconvenience. For the next few months, I poured myself into work. My small marketing firm had just landed a big client, and I worked late nights, chasing deadlines and purpose. Each success felt like proof that I could survive without them, thrive even. Then, out of nowhere, an email arrived. From mommamandad@outlook.com. Subject: We need to talk. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Olivia, your father and I are facing some issues with the bank. It's complicated, but we need temporary help with the mortgage payment until things stabilize. We know you've been doing well and would appreciate your support. Family helps family, after all. Love, Mom. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in disbelief. No apology. No acknowledgement of how they'd treated me. Just an assumption that I'd bail them out again because I always had. I didn't respond. 2 days later, she called. Olivia, she began, her tone suddenly sweet, syrupy. Did you see my email? I know we've had our differences, but I saw it. Good, she said quickly. Then you understand how urgent this is. Mom, I interrupted, my voice steady but cold. I'm not giving you money. There was silence. Then a sharp laugh. Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. It's just a loan.
No, Mom.
It's a pattern, and it stops now. Her tone turned icy. So that's it? You're abandoning your family? I exhaled slowly.
No.
You abandoned me the moment you decided love was conditional. The silence stretched. Then she whispered, almost trembling, You'll regret this, Olivia. Maybe once. I would have believed her. But not anymore. I hung up. After that call, I blocked her number. Not out of anger, but out of peace. I needed to heal. To learn what love looked like when it wasn't bought or demanded. But life, as always, had a way of circling back. A few months later, I was sitting in a cafe when Ethan showed up unannounced. He looked nervous, his shoulders slumped.
Can I sit? He asked.
I nodded. He ordered a coffee but barely touched it. Mom and Dad are losing the house, he finally said. I looked at him, unsure what to feel. I'm sorry. They're saying you could have stopped it, he added softly. That you chose not to. I felt a strange calm wash over me. I didn't cause their choices, Ethan. He rubbed his forehead. I know.
But they won't see it that way.
They're angry. Especially Mom. I stared out the window, watching cars pass by. Ethan, you've always been kind to me. But you've also watched them tear me down for years. You know how it feels to be blamed for everything. He nodded slowly. I do. So tell me, I asked, turning to him. When does it end? He didn't answer. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything. The hospital, the calls, the manipulation. The realization hit me like a wave. They didn't want help. They wanted power. And maybe losing their grip on me felt like losing everything. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. But that freedom wouldn't last long. A few weeks later, I came home to find a letter slipped under my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a single line written in Mom's handwriting. If you think you're free from us, you're mistaken. My stomach dropped. My first instinct was fear. But beneath that, something else stirred, resolve. Because if my mother wanted to play games, this time, I wasn't the same naive daughter she'd always manipulated. I wasn't the woman who begged for approval or folded under guilt. This time, I was ready to stand my ground, even if it meant facing her one last time, on my terms. And as I held that letter under the dim kitchen light, a quiet thought formed in my mind, steady and certain. They may have created me in chaos, but they won't destroy me with it. That night, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything, every email, every message, every attempt to manipulate me. Because if they were going to drag me into another storm, I would be ready with proof, truth, and boundaries they could never cross again. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like someone who finally understood the power of walking away, not out of weakness, but out of strength. It had been 3 weeks since that anonymous letter appeared under my door. 3 weeks of pretending I wasn't looking over my shoulder every time I walked to my car. 3 weeks of fighting the part of me that still wanted to believe my mother wouldn't cross certain lines. But the truth was she already had many times. And that letter wasn't a warning. It was a promise. One Thursday morning, as I was preparing for a client presentation, my phone buzzed with a call from my landlord, Mr. Bowers. His voice was unusually tense. Olivia, he said, I just wanted to confirm. You're moving out next week, right? My stomach dropped.
What? No.
Why would I be moving out? Well, your mother came by this morning. She said you were relocating for work and gave notice on your behalf. She even paid part of the deposit for the next tenant. What? I said again, my voice sharp with disbelief. She doesn't live here. She can't do that. I thought it was strange, he admitted. But she had all your details, lease copy, payment receipts, even your new supposed address. I didn't question it. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mr. Bowers, do not accept anything she says. I'm not moving. Please disregard anything she told you. Understood, he said quickly. I'll fix it. I'm sorry, Olivia. I hung up, hands trembling. My mother had access to my personal information, again. Somehow, she'd found a way to get copies of my documents. That meant she either hacked my emails or convinced someone to give her access. I called Ethan. She what? He said, shocked. She went to my landlord pretending to be me. Do you realize how insane that is? He hesitated. Mom's not doing well lately. She's desperate. They're losing everything. That doesn't give her the right to destroy my life. I snapped. I know, he said softly. But you know how she gets. She doesn't think she's wrong. In her mind, she's just trying to take back control. I rubbed my temples. She's not getting it this time. That night, I changed all my passwords, called the credit bureau, and froze my accounts. I filed a police report for harassment and impersonation, something I never thought I'd have to do against my own mother. 2 days later, she called from an unknown number. I didn't pick up, but the voicemail she left made my skin crawl. So, now you're involving the police? You've really become heartless, Olivia. You think strangers will protect you from your own family? You're more pathetic than I thought. Her voice, once familiar and nurturing, now sounded like something venomous, a reminder of how far she'd fallen into bitterness. Still, a part of me wondered if this was all just an act of desperation, an attempt to force me back under her control. But the other part, the rational one, knew this was exactly how emotional abusers operated, twisting guilt into a weapon, pretending cruelty was love. Days turned into weeks, and the tension built like pressure in a sealed jar. Then one evening, while I was cooking dinner, there was a knock on my door. I opened it and froze. Mom stood there. Her once perfectly styled hair was unkempt, her lipstick smeared, her eyes wide with something between fury and pleading. "We need to talk," she said. "No," I replied firmly, stepping back. "You need to leave." "Olivia, please," she said, trying to push past me, but I blocked the doorway. "Mom, this is harassment. You can't just show up here." "I'm your mother," she cried. "And I'm trying to save you before you make a mistake you can't undo." I let out a bitter laugh. "The only mistake I've made is believing that you'd ever stop hurting me." Her face twisted. "Hurting you? You're the one who's abandoned us, left us to suffer. Your father's sick, Ethan's drowning in loans, and you sit here pretending you're better than everyone." Her words hit like bullets, not because they were true, but because they were carefully aimed to wound. I kept my voice calm. "You had every chance to be kind, Mom. Every chance to love me without expecting something in return. But you only know how to take." Her lip quivered, but she recovered fast. "You think you're safe behind your walls and police reports? You have no idea what real pain is." I straightened, my heart hammering. "Then maybe it's time you learned what consequences are." She blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" I filed a restraining order. Her mouth opened in disbelief. "You wouldn't." "I already did." For a moment, silence filled the hallway. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her shoulders stiff, her steps sharp like the click of a metronome. When the door shut behind her, I slid to the floor, shaking. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was grief, a deep, hollow grief for a relationship that had finally died. But even in that grief, there was relief. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The next few months were quiet, peaceful even. I focused on work, therapy, and the slow, steady process of rebuilding boundaries. I learned that healing wasn't a single decision, it was 1,000 tiny ones. Choosing silence instead of reaction, distance instead of drama, self-respect instead of guilt. Until one afternoon, an unexpected email arrived. Subject: Formal notice. Estate of Richard and Marie Thompson. My breath caught. Estate. That meant my parents. When I opened the document, my heart pounded. It was from a law firm. My father had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. My mother was contesting the will. And apparently, she had added me to the lawsuit. I sat there staring at the screen, numb. After everything, the lies, the manipulation, the restraining order, she still wanted to drag me back into her chaos. I called Ethan, but he didn't pick up. Then, a text appeared. "Don't get involved, Liv. She's spiraling. She's saying you drove Dad to his death." My stomach twisted. "What?" I whispered aloud. "She told people you abandoned the family when he needed you. She's telling her lawyer she wants to prove it." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I just sat there, phone pressed against my chest, tears burning behind my eyes. And then something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about family anymore. It was about my name, my integrity, my peace. For years, I had let my mother control the story. I was the ungrateful daughter, the selfish one, the disappointment. But not anymore. If she wanted a war, this time, I wouldn't play the victim. I would fight, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. I gathered every email, every voicemail, every message she'd ever sent. The police report, the landlord statement, even the hospital confrontation notes I'd written in therapy. I built a file. Thick, detailed, undeniable. My lawyer, a calm and methodical woman named Carla, reviewed it all. Olivia, she said, this isn't just about inheritance. It's about defamation and harassment. You have a solid case. I don't want her punished, I said quietly. I just want her to stop. Carla nodded. Sometimes the only way to stop someone like that is to show them they can't control the narrative anymore. The day of the hearing, I saw her across the courtroom for the first time in months. She looked smaller somehow, her face drawn, her once immaculate posture slumped. But her eyes, those cold, judgmental eyes, were still the same. When the judge asked for evidence, Carla handed over the file. As the pages were read aloud, the emails, the threats, the impersonation attempts, I saw something flicker in my mother's expression. Not guilt. Not remorse. Something else.
Fear.
For the first time in her life, she wasn't in control. The judge ruled in my favor. The restraining order was renewed, her claims dismissed, and her access to my information legally restricted. As I walked out of that courtroom, the sky outside was gray and heavy with rain. I tilted my head back and let the drops fall onto my face. Cold, cleansing, real. I had spent years trying to earn my mother's love, not realizing she only respected power. And now, standing there under that storm, I finally understood something. I didn't need her to see my worth. I just needed to stop letting her define it. That was the real revenge, not ruining her, but freeing myself completely. And as I drove home that day, windshield wipers beating in rhythm with my pulse, I whispered softly to myself, "You're not their bank anymore, Olivia. You never were. You're your own foundation now." For the first time, the words didn't sting. They felt like truth. The months after the court hearing felt surreal. The silence that followed was thick, not empty, but strangely full. Full of the echoes of things I'd finally put to rest, the hum of boundaries holding strong. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to dread or guilt. My mornings weren't colored by the expectation of a call, an accusation, or an obligation. Peace, I realized, wasn't loud. It was the quiet certainty that no one owned me anymore. But peace, too, takes getting used to. At first, I didn't know what to do with the calm. My body had been conditioned to chaos, to waiting for the next storm. So I filled my days with work, yoga, walks through the park near my apartment. I even joined a book club, something I'd always wanted but never had time for. Still, there were moments when I'd catch myself wondering how she was. My mother, Marie Thompson, the woman who had once braided my hair before school and hummed lullabies when I was sick. The woman who later turned those same hands into weapons of manipulation and control. One night, I found myself scrolling through old photos, birthdays, holidays, trips. I stopped at one picture, me at 16, standing beside her at a family barbecue. Her hand was on my shoulder, her smile wide and camera perfect. I remember that day vividly. She'd spent the whole afternoon berating me for forgetting to bring the potato salad, only to turn around and beam for the pictures like nothing happened. That was her superpower, performing love for the world while quietly eroding it behind closed doors. I shut my laptop, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected call from Ethan. "Hey," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Mom's not doing great." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "She's living alone now. The house was foreclosed. Most of her old friends stopped visiting. She keeps asking about you, says you ruined her life." I let out a slow breath. "Ethan, I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped letting her ruin mine." "I know," he said. "I just thought you should know. Dad's insurance helped me clear my loans. I'm trying to stay out of it, but she's not well, Liv. Mentally, I mean." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said softly.
And I meant it.
After the call, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights blink through the fog. For years, I'd fantasized about this moment, her losing control, realizing she couldn't manipulate anyone anymore. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, triumph. But instead, I felt something different. Relief. Not because she was struggling, but because her downfall had nothing to do with me. It was self-made, inevitable. That realization, that I didn't need revenge to feel free, was the quietest kind of victory. I started journaling again. Not about her, but about me. About who I was outside the shadow of guilt and performance. I wrote about what I liked, what I feared, what I wanted. The act felt sacred, almost like reclaiming a part of myself that had gone missing somewhere between my mother's criticism and my own exhaustion. One entry read, "Healing isn't about forgiving her. It's about forgiving myself for staying too long, believing too much, and losing too many years to someone who never planned to understand me." And slowly, the bitterness began to dissolve. It wasn't overnight. Some days I still woke up angry. Other days I'd feel grief, guilt, even nostalgia. Healing wasn't linear. It looped and stung and stretched. But I kept moving. About 6 months later, I received a letter. Not handwritten this time, typed, neat, official-looking. From the Office of Social Services, subject, "Notice of Care, Marie Thompson." I hesitated before opening it. It stated that my mother had been placed in an assisted living facility after being found unresponsive in her home. Dehydration, malnutrition, neglect. No next of kin listed except me and Ethan. My throat tightened. For a long time, I just sat there, reading the letter over and over. That night, I called Ethan again. "I got the notice," I said quietly. "Yeah," he replied. "They call me too." I went to see her. I hesitated. "How was she?"
He sighed.
"Different. Older. Tired." She kept asking if you hated her. "I don't," I whispered. "I just don't want to be hurt again." "I think she knows that now," he said softly. "She's not the same, Liv. Whatever power she thought she had, it's gone." We stayed silent for a while. Then Ethan said something that stuck with me. "Maybe forgiveness isn't about her deserving it. Maybe it's about you deserving peace." That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about all the years I'd spent chasing approval from someone who weaponized love. I thought about the bruises you can't see, the ones that form when you're made to feel small over and over again until you start believing it. And I thought about the little girl I used to be, standing in her bedroom doorway, watching her mother slam a phone against the wall, terrified that somehow it was her fault. The next morning, I got in my car and drove to the facility. When I walked into the room, my heart hammered in my chest. My mother sat by the window, her once rich brown hair streaked with silver, her hands frail, her expression distant. She didn't notice me at first. When she finally looked up, her eyes widened in shock. "Olivia," she whispered, voice trembling. "Hi, Mom," I said softly. Tears filled her eyes. "You came." I nodded, standing a few feet away. "I did." For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You must hate me." I swallowed hard. "I don't. I used to. But not anymore." Her lips quivered. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" I didn't answer right away. "You hurt me," I said honestly. "Over and over. You made me feel like love was something I had to earn. But I'm done carrying that weight." She looked away, her hands twisting the edge of her blanket. "I didn't know how to love you the right way," she murmured. "My mother, she was cruel. I thought being tough made you strong. I was wrong." For a moment, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Sincerity. Maybe regret. Maybe too late, but real nonetheless. "I forgive you," I said quietly. Her eyes filled again. "Why?" "Because I want to be free." She nodded slowly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You always were stronger than me." We didn't talk for long after that. The nurse came in, adjusted her medication, and my mother's eyelids grew heavy. Before I left, she reached out a trembling hand. I hesitated, then took it. Her skin was thin, papery, but warm. "Take care of yourself," she whispered. "Don't become me." "I won't," I said. And I meant it. As I walked out of that building, the sun was setting, a soft orange glow stretching across the sky. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to run from my past or prove anything to it. I wasn't defined by what she did to me anymore. I was defined by what I chose to do next. Over the next few weeks, I visited her a few more times, not out of obligation but out of peace. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. There was no grand reconciliation, no movie-perfect ending. Just quiet understanding, the kind that only comes when you've accepted that closure isn't always clean. And yet it was enough. Months later, when she passed away in her sleep, I didn't cry. Not out of coldness, but because there was nothing left unresolved. At the funeral, Ethan stood beside me, holding my hand. There were only a few people there, some distant relatives, a couple of old neighbors. As the priest spoke, I felt a soft wind move through the trees, carrying away years of hurt I didn't need anymore. Afterward, Ethan and I walked to the car in silence. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how true it sounded. "I actually am." He smiled faintly. "Dad would have been proud of you, Liv." Maybe. Maybe not. But for the first time, it didn't matter. When I got home that night, I opened my journal again and wrote the final entry I would ever write about them. I thought I wanted revenge. I thought I needed justice. But what I really needed was to live without fear, to love myself enough to walk away from people who couldn't love me back. Peace is the best revenge. And now I finally have it. I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. It wasn't the ending I expected, but it was the one I needed. And for the first time, I truly believed it. I was free. The first morning after the lawsuit ended felt strange. Not victorious. Not bitter. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after months of chaos when your body forgets what peace sounds like. I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the early sunlight slide across my kitchen counter, painting gold over everything that used to feel heavy. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Mom hadn't reached out. Not a call. Not a text. Nothing. The news had already spread across our small community, and people had opinions. They always did. Some said I'd gone too far. Others whispered that my mother had finally reaped what she sowed. But I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't owe anyone explanations anymore. I'd learned that when you spend your life defending yourself to others, you let them write your story. I was done letting anyone else hold the pen. A week after the verdict, I received a letter. A real letter. Not an email, not a message. Just an envelope with my name scrawled in Mom's handwriting, shaky, uneven, like she'd hesitated before writing it. I stared at it for nearly an hour before opening it. Part of me wanted to toss it into the trash unopened. Another part, the one still foolishly searching for closure, tore it open carefully. Inside was a short note. "Olivia, you didn't have to destroy everything to prove a point. I was only trying to help. I hope you're happy now. Mom." I read it 3 times, waiting for my chest to tighten the way it used to. But it didn't. Instead, I laughed, not cruelly, just softly, almost sadly. It was such a perfect reflection of her. Even in defeat, she had to twist it, had to make herself the victim. The letter wasn't an apology. It was a final attempt to make me doubt myself.
But it didn't work this time.
I placed the letter back into the envelope and tucked it away in a box. Not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. Because here's the truth. Closure doesn't come from an apology. It comes from accepting that you may never get one, and still choosing to move forward. I started rebuilding from there.
Slowly.
Intentionally. I sold my old apartment. The one Mom had helped me choose when I was 22 and still believed she knew what was best for me. I moved into a smaller place by the bay, where the mornings smelled like salt and the nights hummed with the sound of waves against the docks. I'd wake up early, walk to the edge of the pier with my journal, and write down one thing I refused to carry anymore.
Guilt. Fear.
Resentment. Each word, 1 page at a time, until the weight of them didn't sit so heavy in my chest. And somehow, the emptiness began to fill with new things. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I opened a small studio, nothing fancy, but it became my sanctuary. I painted stories, the kind that spoke through color instead of words. Sometimes people would come in and stare at the canvases, telling me they could feel something they couldn't explain. And I'd smile, Because that's exactly what pain processed through art does. It speaks in a language deeper than sound. One afternoon, months later, I got a message from Ethan, my younger brother. His name popping up on my phone made my stomach twist with old instinct. The last time we spoke, he'd been furious, calling me selfish, accusing me of ruining Mom's life. But his message was short. "Can we talk?" I hesitated before replying. Then I typed back, "I'm willing to listen." He came to the studio that weekend. I barely recognized him. The arrogance that used to hang off him like armor was gone. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but emotionally. Like he'd finally run out of excuses. "Mom's been different," he said after a long silence. "She's bitter, angry all the time. I think she misses you, but she'll never say it." I let him talk. About how the family had turned against each other after the court case. How Mom blamed everyone but herself. How he'd finally realized how much of her manipulation had shaped his life too. "I wanted to hate you," he admitted quietly. "But the truth is, you were the only one brave enough to say no." I couldn't see it then. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I didn't cry. I just reached across the table and said, "You don't owe me anything, Ethan. We all survive the way we know how. You're allowed to start over, too." He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. That was enough. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need reconciliation. I just needed peace, and that conversation gave me a piece of it. Months passed. The world kept turning, and I kept healing in small, ordinary ways. There were still nights I woke up remembering her voice, sharp and smug, telling me, "We're not your bank anymore." But now those words didn't sting. They reminded me of the day I stopped being a child in a woman's body and started becoming my own person. It's strange how the very words meant to break you can become your turning point. I began writing again. Essays about financial independence, boundaries, and emotional resilience. I shared them online under a pseudonym at first, terrified of being vulnerable. But people resonated with them. Women wrote back, telling me they'd lived through similar betrayals, that my words helped them realize they weren't crazy, just controlled. Eventually, I stopped hiding behind a pseudonym. I put my real name on my work, claiming my voice in full. And that's when something unexpected happened. One morning, I opened my email and saw a message from a publishing house. They'd read my essays and wanted to offer me a deal for a memoir about family, money, and reclaiming power. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, whispering to myself, "Mom would hate this." And then laughing, because that was the sweetest irony of all. Writing the book was both therapy and torture. I relived everything. The manipulation, the guilt, the fights, the silence. But for the first time, I wasn't writing as a victim. I was writing as a survivor. Each chapter felt like reclaiming another piece of myself she'd tried to take. When the book finally came out, it wasn't some bestseller overnight. But it reached people, real people who needed it. I'd get messages like, "Your story gave me courage to walk away," or, "I realized my mom's love was conditional too, and now I'm learning to love myself." And that was enough revenge for me. Not the kind that burns others down, but the kind that lights a path for others to follow. 1 year after publication, I stood in a small bookstore signing copies of my book when I saw her, Mom. She stood at the back of the line, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, clutching a copy of my memoir like it might bite her. For a moment, time stopped. My heart raced, but I stayed calm. When it was her turn, she stepped forward and placed the book on the table. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "You wrote about me." I met her eyes. "I wrote about what happened." She nodded, looking down. "People talk." "I'm sure they do," I said gently. "But they also listen. And maybe they'll learn something from it." There was a long silence between us, the kind filled with years of unsaid things. Finally, she said, almost whispering, "You've done well for yourself." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing she was capable of. And strangely, it was enough. I signed her book, writing inside, "For the lessons that shaped me, even the painful ones." She looked at the message for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I watched her go, Not with anger, not with longing, but with peace. Because sometimes closure isn't a grand moment. Sometimes it's just the quiet acceptance that the story is over. Now, when I look back, I don't see the girl who begged her mother for approval. I see a woman who learned to approve of herself. A woman who realized that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You made it." So if you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most, remember this. You're not broken for walking away. You're brave for saving yourself. You don't owe forgiveness to those who never earned it. You owe peace to the person you're becoming. And if they ever tell you, "We're not your bank anymore," you smile and say, "Good. I'm finally investing in myself." Because that's what I did. And it changed everything. End of story.